Hi, everybody. Okay, this is the breakdown that I promised of the Age of Deception or the Age of Deceit videos. I had posted both of those at they were over 3 hours long each, and I had promised to break them down into segments so that people could download them more easily, and hopefully we can reach more people because there are millions, untold millions of people who would never click on a video that says it's 3 hours long, whether they were interested in the topic or not. But that being said, let me slide this over and show you guys. Over 400,000 people just in the last 2 months since I uploaded the first Age of Deceit video did click on it and watch it. So that has to restore your faith in humanity. People are waking up. People are absolutely waking up to what is going on around us. But anyway, as promised, this is these two videos here are going to be broken down into one 8-part series called the Age of Deceit series. And I'll put different subtitles behind the Age of Deceit title in every title line because this series is packed with information. There are 1,000 different things discussed in this series. It's not just one thing that we just beat over and over for 6 hours. We go through a ton of different topics. So I'll put those in the subtitle in the title line behind each one, but it'll be 8 parts. So this part you're watching right now is only one part of an 8-part series. And as always, I do encourage you, please watch all of the parts, because especially part 4, which would be the end of this full version, and part 8, which would be the end of the second full version video, both of those parts are really the most shocking. So it would be a shame if you watch just the first parts, which are more of an introduction to the topic, and you missed out on the really shocking information. And vice versa, I don't encourage skipping forward just to those parts, because the whole point of putting all of this together in one place in context is a laying the foundation sort of process so that people can receive this information, because a lot of it is really fringy and it's hard for them to understand it unless you put it in context of everything else that is going on around us. If you take just that one little interesting part out, like everybody does in a 8-minute sound bite, then it's just parody to most people. So that's why I put it all together in one place and try to bring these puzzle pieces together. So if you are interested in this type of subject matter at all, please do take the time to watch the entire series. Even if it takes you a couple of months, please do, because there are some real gems in every single episode of this series. So this is the first thing that I thought was really interesting, but I couldn't leave in. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the hive mind. So toward the end of the video, when I was talking about the Lebensborn breeding program that the Nazis had during World War II, and I led into Max Speer's testimony, and I just played 2 tiny clips, but the one that I wanted to point out was when he was talking about the type B blood group. And he was talking about how these modern day Nazis in these underground bases, these men in black, as we call them, the shadow government, that one of the things they were researching and working on in their super soldier programs and genetic engineering and cloning was to isolate properties found in the B blood type group of humanity, because that same type of thing was also found in what we call the gray aliens or the synthetic drones. If you haven't watched the other full Age of Deceit, the Transagenda breeding program, please do go back and watch it, even if you have to break it up in 30-minute segments and watch it for a week, because I show the actual science behind synthesizing human organs and human tissue and skin and all of that stuff. This is real. I know it sounds fringy, but this is high-tech reality. It's not science fiction anymore. But anyway, these Greys are said to have this hive mind, this hive mentality. In fact, some of the ancient texts and the oral traditions refer to them as the ant people. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the video that went viral about the ants circling the cell phone, and a lot of people say, oh, it was fake, it was this, that. I mean, this is real technology. And it's not any cell phone, any time, but yes, there are certain electromagnetic frequencies that cause especially these creatures who have the hive minds. That's why they have queen ants and queen bees in these types of creatures. because they naturally have the hive mind, which is why we see that genetic structure also used in these Nephilim creatures they call the aliens, these big-eyed looking ant people and mantis creatures, and the branches of cryptids that they call insectoids. And even the Native Americans, you know, they said that certain tribes of humans were taken underground by, quote, ant people, the ant people in the underworld, and that they stayed there until after the flood, and then they resurfaced on Earth and began to repopulate. But anyway, here's a few seconds of that clip showing how ants will circle this cell phone when it rings. So as soon as that electromagnetic frequency starts being emitted from the phone, the ants immediately organize. And of course, every cell phone has a little different frequency signature. That's why all of our cell phones don't ring at the same time. We just get the calls that are aimed toward our specific number. So that's why this experiment won't be duplicated every time everybody's phone rings. But it absolutely can be duplicated in bees and ants, you know, with frequency experiments if you really want to. Here it goes. It rings. See, it rings right there. And instantly, rank and file. Rank and file. And again, this is interesting technology to make sense of some dreams and visions that I've seen that people have received, and they're like, I don't know exactly what this meant. But one in particular was this guy was shown a rave. All of these people were at a rave, and they were all dancing to the music or jumping up and down in unison to this music. And one guy left the crowd and went up to the microphone and said something, I can't remember what he said, but something into the microphone about them all being under this mind control. And he said he saw all of them instantly stop in unison, like they were one body, and they all turned around and exited the warehouse at the very same time, like they were all one entity. Sort of like you'd see in the old Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie, which is also a common theme in tons of dreams and visions of the end times, where people see this hive mentality of people in all sorts of situations, whether they're in a market and they don't have the mark of the beast, the neural implant. They'll say all of the people in the market somehow knew that they didn't have the mark of the beast. Or this sort of zombie apocalypse theme where they'll see all of these people chasing them down because they know they're not emitting that frequency, whether that comes from a literal demonic possession or whether that's this neural implant, this bioneural implant that links into the human brain and into the neurological circuit of the human body as a form of essentially total control, right? And this is a real thing, right? Right, here's an article. Elon Musk launches Neuralink, a venture to merge the human brain with artificial intelligence. So if you're not demonically possessed just by turning your body over, as many of them do in their occult rituals and all of that type of thing, then there's always this option for all of the techies, all the people who are, oh, look at the virtual reality glasses. I'm going to live in virtual reality and I'm going to link my brain in. And you know, I've done a ton of videos on that, how they've conditioned our children to be linked in, right? Linked in through all this social networking. You have to be linked in to everything and everybody be aware of your every move. It's just high-tech demonic possession. And I'll talk about the black-eyed kids in just a minute. But in the scope of religion, air quotes implied, you receive a prophetic dream like that and you're like, what? You know, this doesn't seem very religious. What on earth could that mean? And I contend it's literal. You're being shown literally the technologies that will be employed under the reign of the Antichrist. And we're seeing them build the infrastructure for that Antichrist control system all around us. Not only are they putting up this 5G network all around us, but they've got these what we're calling the sun simulators up above us with this Li-Fi technology. I talk about all that in this biggest secret sun simulator video about the Li-Fi technology, because Wi-Fi is like caveman stuff to them. Li-Fi is the new thing. They know that you can send information through light frequencies, and so that's already been deployed above us. And for people, I always get this, oh, if it's a sun simulator, how is it solar powered then if there's no sun? And You know, all the brainwashed mainstreamers, they think they're so smart because they can't think outside of what they've been told. But yeah, solar power is caveman stuff too. This is powered by Tesla technology. There's free energy all around us. Tesla, the same guy who discovered AC, alternating current, that now powers almost every single home in the entire world, he also discovered this free, limitless energy source that's all around us. And that's another video I have coming up about the Tesla Tower. They now have a Tesla Tower up, you know, in Milford, Texas, and you can go on their website and it discusses the technology and stuff. So they're admitting it. It's being, that infrastructure is being set up around us as well. But it's already over us in black ops. So they can beam information just like a wireless router, except this is in the skies above us. But speaking biologically about how they're tampering with our DNA, about how they're isolating the qualities found in the B blood type group. And then they want to implant that type of receiver, that type of DNA into all of us so that we will function better under this type of a hive mind. So this is another video that I put up about a year ago, and it's about how at present 8% of the human genome is not from us. It's been transplanted through viruses. And I know, again, they tell us that viruses are just natural. No, they're not nanotechnology. No, they're just natural things that occur in our environment and we don't really understand them. No, everybody knows that you can hollow out a virus and use it to transplant a snippet of DNA. That's all viruses are. They're delivery mechanisms. They're like nanotechnology that carry a snippet of DNA and they transplant it. When we get sick from a virus, it's not the virus that makes us sick. It's our body rejecting the DNA transplant. It's our immune system fights it off. And then that's why we have all of the symptoms. It makes us very sick when they try to transplant these DNA snippets in us. Okay, but back to the ants circling the phone. And of course, this is very reminiscent of what we see during the Hajj, the Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca, where they all walk in circles around the cube, just walk circles around it. It's part of their ritual. And there's just a ton about that, the cube, that I can't go into right now. I'll touch on Kabbalah, Kaaba, Allah. I'll touch on their Kabbalah occultism here in a minute. But it goes so much deeper, from everything from the Masonic keystone to Saturn to the Black Sun cult we saw with the Nazis. It's throughout everything. They say inside of there is the Black Stone or the Black Sun, which ties into the Nibiru Planet X thing. I mean, this thing, it's all one big thing. It's mind-blowing. I mean, we even see the cube used in the Hellraiser movies. Hellraiser. And this is just a small representation of what we call planets are doing above us. These satellites that we see above us, these luminaries as we call them, and the energies and harmonics that they are emitting toward our world. If you've watched any of my videos on the dimensions, I go into that quite a bit, how in 3 dimensions what we perceive as a sphere is actually a tetrahedron. It's actually a pyramid. It's actually layered and all of that. It even goes back to the early QAnon posts. It was repeatedly, expand your thinking. What is the keystone? Find the keystone. What is the keystone? This Masonic keystone. So that Masonic keystone has a lot of meaning. As for celestial mechanics, you can see from this carpentry site, the keystone is the center of the firmament. So again, it goes back to celestial mechanics, or, you know, this is an arch for carpentry, but you get it. Because, you know, that's their cult, the master builders, right? Because the Elohim, the fallen Elohim, they were part of God's angels at one time who were in charge of the creation. So they know, the master builders, right? They know how all of this works. But as in all things with Antichrist, the cabal is just a pathetic mimicry of our master carpenter. You know, Jesus Christ came as a carpenter, but he is the true master. He is the Lord. But their cabal and all of their mimicry and attempts to resurrect their fallen angels and all of that is nothing. It's nothing. We know we have the true creator. For all of their building they've been doing all of these thousands of years to build this establishment and this prison and this hierarchy and everything they've done, it's just built on sinking sand. That's what the Bible says, because they built their foundation on lies. So it's a house of cards, and it's coming down. It's coming down around them right now. Here's Matthew 7:24-27. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock, that rock of ages, Jesus Christ. And this is the storm right now. The calm before the storm is over. This is the storm. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. They can't take us down. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down and the streams rose and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. We are building an eternal kingdom that will last through all ages, and of it there will be no end. But they built their kingdom on a foundation of lies, and it fell with a great crash. Anyway, all of that's for another video. Right now, I'm just talking about this hive mentality. And of course, the predictive programming, as always, Stephen King's novel Cell, which was made into a movie and shows this hive mentality broadcast through frequencies in cell phones. And if you watched the movie, you know that the scene at the end of the movie is showing this exact same technology that I showed with the ants, with the people circling around this tower, which again ties back to the movie They Live, because that's how they kept people blinded, was broadcasting a frequency, a signal out of a tower. And that's what the whole movie was about. They were trying to take out that tower broadcasting that frequency. But the point is, this is real, and these people have been investigating the genetic markers and actually tampering with our DNA to make us more susceptible to these technologies. And I did a video talking a lot about this in the QAnon series called Hold the Phone. And again, it doesn't matter if you like QAnon or hate QAnon or believe in QAnon or disbelieve QAnon. That's completely irrelevant. This is just me presenting my research in that QAnon genre. But anyway, in that video, I show all of the patents for this technology. This is real. It's been patented. And I also show the diagrams from the patents, from the registered patents, showing how not only can they broadcast these frequencies through our cell phones, but through our computer monitors. Anybody who does this for a living, you know how you feel if you sit in front of your computer too long. It's a battle, but nothing like what's coming. Okay, also along those lines of altering the human genome, there was another part that I cut out of the Age of Deceit video, but it wasn't really about the aerosol distribution of this type of stuff to implant DNA over the masses. It was more about specific DNA inserted into just the elite class, the ruling class. And I cut this section out of the part when we were talking about in vitro fertilization. It was about an hour and a half in. And I was showing all of the different stars who, openly talked about IVF and how their children were created in laboratories. And it was an inordinate amount. And remember, I had gone into that whole spiel and shown all these different magazine covers with all of the different celebrity class people that had twins or multiples created in the laboratory. Oh, and that's another thing I should have put in there. Well, I've got Kate on the screen here, Prince William's wife and their twins. There was a comment that brought something to mind that I totally should have put in the video, and I forgot. Of course, I pinned his comment to the top, and it's not pinned at the top, of course. Here it is, Manuel Gomez. Thank you for the comment. Thank you for pointing that out. He says, the royalty is not English, they are German. Which is absolutely true. It's so funny that all of these British people are, sort of worshiping what they think is their royal family when these are Gothic Germans. And I should have put that in the part about the Ashkenazi. But anyway, I replied here below it, and I had pinned it above, even though it's not at the top where it should be. That the Windsor name, now used by Queen Elizabeth II and other British royals, only dates back to 1917. Again, that's World War I era, a date directly linked to what the Montauk boys were talking about, Duncan Cameron and those guys involved in the Montauk projects, with recollections leading back to this exact era. But before that, the British royal family bore the German name, and I can't pronounce it, but it's obviously from the Sacs, and it actually ends with Gotha, because they were German Goths who fled and changed their names so that they could continue as royalty. But yeah, the British consider them English or British, but they're absolutely not. Again, that's what I pointed out in the last 3 or 4 videos, probably, that the Jesuits are the Ashkenazi. That's why we saw the spider and the escape routes, the rat lines going through the Catholic churches for the Nazis, because they're the same thing. But for those who haven't watched those videos, I'll just reiterate, the Gothics from the Dark Ages, the Gothic Germans are the Ashkenazi Jews, are the Nazi regime, are the Jesuits. They are all, this is all the cabal. We just call it the cabal to make it simple these days. But those are all masks or faces of the same entity. But great catch, yeah, the British royals are actually the German Goths. But back to the twinning or the cloning. The question is, since so many of these children are created through IVF in laboratories, are they implanting any other sort of DNA into these embryos? And we know that the ones that we see publicly, like all these IVF cases that I just put in that last video, that's just what they're showing us publicly. We know that there are mad scientists in underground bases doing all sorts of genetic tampering. You can imagine what they're doing if this is what they're showing us publicly. Here's a clip from a video that I put up 10 or 11 years ago. Yeah, I said 10 or 11 years ago, back when the internet was a baby. Yeah, here you can see the date. It was September 17th of 2008. So I guess it was 10 years and a few months ago. So the quality's not going to be that good. Thing was standard definition and sort of blurry. And we didn't have all of this screenshot software and stuff that we have today. So we did the best we could. But I think you'll get the idea. This is some footage that I captured from a BBC documentary. It was actually just a news broadcast. And they were talking about making these human-animal hybrids. And keep in mind, this was well over 10 years ago, what they were saying to the public. So you can only imagine what they're capable of today and what they've been doing behind closed doors since well before a decade ago.
This embryo is part mouse, part cow. In a few months, this Newcastle lab is hoping to create a human-cow hybrid. If that leaves you uneasy, the scientists here understand how you feel.
It does seem a little abhorrent from a first analysis, the fact that we're mixing bits of cow cells with bits of human cells, and people would automatically think, yeah, well, okay. But what you have to understand is that we're actually using very, very little information from the cow in order to do this reprogramming idea.
This is highly complex science, the creation of cytoplasmic hybrids, known as cybrid embryos. The starting point is a cow's egg, which is cut open by a laser. The next step is to take a human cell, perhaps from a patient with Parkinson's disease, and inject it into the egg. Now, this is the crucial point at which an embryo is created, because by using an electric shock, the hybrid embryo starts growing.
So talking about actual hybrid, humanoid hybrids, that brings me back around to this phenomenon we see that everybody calls reptilian eyes. And I'm not talking about the ones that are just digital artifacts and pixelization and compression errors. And I know, and I believe a lot of those people who make those videos, I don't think they're big hoaxers or clickbait artists or anything like that. I think that when people start to awaken and they see the real stuff, they get excited and they're overzealous. So then every pixelization they see or whatever, they're like, oh, look, I caught one, I caught one. So yeah, I get it. You do have to wade through a tremendous amount of stuff that isn't valid. But that doesn't negate the fact that there is evidence out there, actual captures that I consider very valid. And most of those have nothing to do with the slit eyes that might be light reflections and things like that. These usually have more to do with like the sideways blinking, that there's some sort of membrane that does this sideways blinking and things like that. Things that we actually see in the animal kingdom in other species. Now, see, this is why I wanted to put all of this into one giant 5-hour video, because taken out of context, those reptilian eye things, they seem sort of fringy. But in light of the clip that I just showed you from the BBC, where scientists are saying, but we're taking small amounts of cow DNA and putting it into humans. We're taking small snippets of DNA and making human hybrids. I mean, you just heard it out of their own mouth, out of the scientists' own mouth, that they do that. And then we see these people in the ruling class who appear mostly human, but we're catching them with these traits that, like that eye thing, that is a lizard trait. That is a reptile trait, that they have a second membrane under their eyelids. So I know it seems unimaginable. And when you hear people like Mr. E say things like, these are Nephilim, these aren't people, these are Nephilim hybrids, they're this, that, and the other. He has a great sense of humor, and I love his sense of humor. He totally cracks me up. But I think it's useful to point out that there's science behind this, that it's absolutely very possible to make sense of what we keep seeing. It seems like this crazy conspiracy theory. It actually exactly goes along with the biblical narrative. It goes along with the archaeological records. It goes along with the medical evidence, like I presented in the very beginning of that Age of Deceit video, where I talked about the hermaphrodites and then all of the other genetic traits, giantism, acromegaly, hypertrichosis, polydactyl, the other traits that we see medically. This is another one, and I know it's hard to accept. But let's just watch some of these clips and you can decide for yourself. And it looks like they must feel it or something, because every time it like accidentally happens when they're on camera, they'll always like put their head down really fast or flick their hair, or they'll close their eyes, or they'll act sort of startled and kind of blink their eyes 3 or 4 times real fast. Like that, you'll see they do that. What are the odds, if these were just camera anomalies, that they would be physically responding to it? That one with the politician, Newt Gingrich's wife, her eyes seemed to sort of go sideways, which reminded me more of a goat than a lizard. And in light of the Baphomet being a trans species entity, I thought that was interesting, but who knows? I absolutely do believe that they are adding DNA and they are splicing DNA in this breeding program. But this next set of eye anomalies, yeah, it could go either way. It very well could just be straight up demon possession. Because in these clips, there doesn't appear to be a membrane like a typical reptile would have underneath the eyelid. It seems to be that the pupil itself is changing form. When they say the eyes are the window to the soul, I think there's a lot more to that than we take it for. But notice one thing, that these are all the same players, the same people that are on the forefront of this pansexual and transgender and all of this movement. And you'll notice this handful of actors, percentage-wise, out of human population is not that many, but this handful of actors, all of their stuff goes viral. I mean, they even use the word that it's a virus. It goes viral. While all of the algorithms on Google and YouTube and all of the search engines and everything suppress us, we have to struggle to get 10,000 people or 20,000 people to hear our voice as humans. These people who have literally nothing to offer society besides the cult, that's what it is. That's how cultures are created. They have put their cult on top of the tribes of humanity, the 12 tribes of Israel, or the 12 ethnicities of humankind, the Hebrews. And I'll talk about the cult and how it influences all the different ethnicities of humankind here in a minute when I do the Kabbalah section. But for now, I just wanted to point out that this does spread virally, just like an infection. Their culture, their behavior, their satanic behavior, they are spreading virally to all the children of the world. That's why all of a sudden we see all of this sexual perversion and all of it manifesting. It's because it works. They've worked very hard and purposefully to make our children their toys, to convince our children to turn their bodies over to every manner of perversion and abuse and sadomasochism and all of the things we see coming out of Hollywood and the other digital industries, of course, the music industry, and now YouTube. You can go on and see the lots of boys they have on YouTube broadcasting how to put makeup on, boys, and all of this stuff, which I will show you clips in just a minute, is absolutely part of a cult, an ancient cult, which is now being broadcast virally to everyone. And it's always coming from the same handful of actors, the same handful of players. And if you watch to the end of this video, I'll show you some shocking stuff about how small this family remnant, this synagogue of Satan really is. To wield such power as a coven, it's really amazing because there's not as many as you think. That's why we quote unquote mysteriously see these same people reoccurring in all of these news broadcasts with school shootings and all of these different things. But let's look at these clips and then we'll talk about it afterwards. And before all you atheist trolls jump on me and say, oh, religious nut talking about demonic possession, They themselves, in their own interviews, talk about these entities entering them. That's in their own words. Of course, they're glorifying it, like I talked about in the last video. This is all part of the conditioning to make all of their followers, millions and millions, tens of millions of followers these people have, to make them think, oh, this is normal. Demon possession is normal. And in fact, it's the way to succeed, is to allow these entities to enter you, because that's what they're out there preaching.
I raised my hands up, and it was kind of the first time I felt something else come into me, and I knew that was gonna be my coming out night. Sasha is my alter ego.
Roman is a crazy boy who lives in me, and he says the things that I don't want to say.
Another strange eye anomaly that started being reported around the 1990s. Maybe it was always happening and it just became popularized then because we had access to the internet and we started being able to talk to one another. I know I have read at least one or two accounts that dated back to like the 1940s and 1950s. I think maybe even one in the 1920s or 30s. But the reports are always the same, that the children come up, and it can be anywhere to like teenage aged children or small children. And that's what makes it so anomalous, is they will show up on people's doorsteps and ask permission to come in, almost like a vampire legend that they can't enter unless you invite them in. Which again goes back to the last video where I was talking about that we have authority over the demons. We have authority over the spiritual realm, and we have to invite them in just as surely as we have to invite Jesus Christ into our heart to become one with him. The universal laws of free will also make it so people have to invite these demons into them, which they're doing willingly, which is what all of this whole propaganda thing is about. And like I talked about, the trans agenda, to convince people to do it willingly, to embrace this as their I identify as this thing trying to come inside me and integrate with these evil spirits of their own free will and embody them, and then they overtake them. And then once they're inside you, you think it's your thoughts, because it's a biological symbiotic relationship, a 3D, three-dimensional body, soul, spirit. They integrate with you. And so people think, oh, well, that's me. I was born this way, or these are my thoughts, when in fact it's these entities. But anyway, the story goes that they won't come inside if you won't allow them in. But they will be very persistent with, but I need to use your phone, but I'm in danger, but I need to call my parents, with very robotic speech, again, with this sort of synthetic thing. And again, with the dark eyes, very similar to what we see with the synthetic gray aliens. So I don't know if these black-eyed kids are part of this breeding program, but the encounters are increasing. I know that. So I don't know if it's just that children and young people are so susceptible these days to demonic possession because they have no resistance. They don't even believe that the spiritual realm and the other dimensions exist. And they're completely unprotected because the establishment has banned the Bible, banned prayer, banned the 10 Commandments. They have absolutely no knowledge of how to get spiritual protection. And in fact, they mock it. If you try to tell them, hey, you need to protect yourself, these things are out to get you, they're, oh, Jesus Christ, oh, the Bible, that's it. Oh, invisible flying spaghetti monster in the sky. They're so programmed and brainwashed that you can't even reason with them. So anyway, they're utterly unprotected. So I'm not sure if the black-eyed kids are just spirit possessions or if they are hybrids. I only have one personal testimony of this phenomenon. And this happened to me probably 15 years ago or so. A friend of mine came to me all weirded out and scared and wanted to ask me some questions. She was not saved at all, but she knew that I was, and I had a youth ministry at that time. And so she actually came with her teenage sons and pulled me aside to ask me some questions. And she told me this story about encountering a black-eyed person, and it wasn't a child with her, it was a grown man. She was in a bar and drinking, and she met this man, and they were trying to hook up. They were talking about going home together or whatever, total stranger. And she said he turned around to get a cigarette out of his pack and light it. And when he turned back to her, she said his eyes were completely black, like this, no white in the eyes at all. And but he was still talking, like trying to make arrangements to take her home and stuff. And she said that she felt, not just because of the black eyes, which would have been enough, but she felt this terror and evil sort of emanating from him as he was talking completely normally. So she grabbed her purse and excused herself to the bathroom really quick and went out the back door. And she said that was the last she saw of him. But she said she's never forgotten it, and it really shook her up. And she wanted to ask me if I knew anything about that. And at the time, that was before this subject was really popularized, so I really knew very little about it. But to me, it clearly sounded like demonic possession. And because of her lifestyle, these things followed her. Her children told me the same stories in the youth group about they'd be standing in the mirror brushing their teeth, and they'd look up in the mirror and there'd be like a black hooded figure standing behind them in the mirror just for a glimpse, and then it would disappear, and shadows moving around their rooms at night. And I think they were both of the boys, one of the boys for sure, but I think both of the boys were homosexual and very ill, stricken with all sorts of illnesses. I mean, they were really plagued. They had opened up every single portal you can imagine into their homes and into their bodies, and invited every sort of, evil spirit, and took part in every sort of sin. And they were just open vessels to these evil spirits. That was their lifestyle. So in that context, I don't necessarily think that these things are all part of the breeding program. I believe some of them are, but I also believe that you can see changes in the eyes from spiritual possession. And like I said, I saw it with my ex. He had the most beautiful blue-green eyes with just a hint of hazel sometimes. And when this thing happened, when he gave himself over to this homosexual lifestyle and abandoned his child and family and everything, his eyes went, when he started posting pictures of himself on the gay websites and soliciting sex online and all of that, I couldn't believe the pictures. It didn't even look like him. I mean, he had the darkest, almost black brown eyes his eye color physically changed. It was unbelievable. I saved the pictures in case I ever have to prove it. I'm obviously not going to show you his picture and tell you his name. But yeah, his eye color physically changed. Went much darker when he surrendered his life to the service of that spirit and left to become a homosexual and all of that. His eye color changed. And in my opinion, I think a lot of these people know that their eyes change the further they get into the occult and the deeper they get initiated into every level of the hierarchy, because you'll notice it's very common. Like, here's cult leader Jim Jones. Amongst cult leaders, you'll always see the longer they're in it, the deeper they get into it, they'll start wearing dark glasses and then completely blackout glasses indoors. You'll see it all the time. And I know now we think, oh, well, celebrities are always wearing dark glasses inside because they don't want to be recognized. They don't want to be recognized in the airport. They don't want to be recognized when they're just trying to go about their lives. And I'm sure a lot of that's true too. But I know that if you pay attention, you will see these cult leaders start to wear these dark glasses and cover their eyes the longer they're in it and the deeper they get into it. And there's always a sexual perversion aspect. When you get into it, after it's finally blown open, you'll see that it wasn't just about scamming people out of money. It'll be like Jim Jones. He was having all of this sex with all of these different men and women and orgies and all sorts of stuff, making them come back in his office and do all sorts of things. You'll see that again and again. There's always a sexual perversion aspect to it. Kill, steal, and destroy. That's what they do. That's what the Bible says. That's what they do. And you'll see that after he got done using them in every other way, yeah, he ended up killing them all, which is precisely what I talked about in the last video. It's very sad to see all of these, even in the ruling class, to see them duped, to see any human duped into turning their lives over to serving these demonic entities, because in the end of it, they're not going to be ruling anything. Because demons are bent on destruction, and they always end up killing their host. It's the biological process of a parasite. That's what it does. It doesn't help the host. That's not a symbiotic relationship that is helpful to the host. A parasite will use the host up and kill the host. And it's really very sad. like the suicide rates that I read you about the transgenders in the last video that I put up. Those, I read them straight out of the university's suicide prevention documents. There's a reason. There's a reason why those souls are so tortured that over 40% of them either commit suicide or try to commit suicide. And going back to that transgender agenda, there was that connection, Jim Jones and Harvey Milk. Look it up. He did a lot of events with Harvey Milk during that time before they knew that Jim Jones was this evil cult leader that was leading all these people to this death pact. And Harvey Milk was the pioneering gay politician. And of course, when Hollywood makes their movies about Harvey Milk, they remove everything about his connection to the People's Temple cult and all of that. But of course, that's no surprise because they also removed the fact that Jim Jones was connected to all the leftist politicians. Like, here's a picture of Jim Jones with the lieutenant governor and San Francisco mayor. So this wasn't some crazy Charles Manson type out of nowhere, although he was created by the Order of the Orient as well. But anyway, everybody pretty much knows that Jim Jones, that this was the Guyana was a CIA operation. And again, with the swastika on the forehead, it's not a mystery. It's not a coincidence. It's just another link back to that same Gothic German Ashkenazi Nazi cabal that I've been talking about for the last several videos. And just like Charles Manson had all these mysterious connections with the Beach Boys and, all these major rich celebrities are letting Charles Manson like hang out at their house and, all of that kind of stuff. It doesn't seem to make sense to us. But when you know that they're all one big cabal, of course, it makes sense now. Some of the most well-known cult leaders are always surrounded by rich celebrities and politicians. So Jim Jones's connection with Harvey Milk and the advancement of the homosexual agenda through the political realm, all of that makes perfect sense when you realize who these people are. But when you're talking about cults instead of politics, you're definitely talking about religion. So there's no doubt there's a religious aspect to this and some anomaly with the eyes and the covering of the eyes and all of that. And surely you can see with the Guyana massacre that the spirits controlling this guy were demons. Sexual perversion is just one manifestation of demonic possession. Demons are evil. They love torture and pain and, destruction and destroying families, and they're wicked in every way. They're evil. There is evil. Evil exists. So if you look into these people who are promoting sexual perversion and who are abusing their own children and transitioning them before they can make decisions for themselves and all of this type of thing, you'll see these other evidences in their lives. So like here's Angelina Jolie. Remember that video that was leaked a couple of years back that showed her in the drug den? And a lot of people claimed that it was evidence of these Illuminati rituals and all of the satanic ritual abuse that goes on in these families. Now, I've watched the video in its entirety, and I can't say that it says that, but I can at least say that it proves what we're talking about here, that they show many of these traits if you knew what they did behind closed doors. So I'll play this clip where you can see behind closed doors when she's talking amongst people she trusts. They're talking about watching these snuff torture films. She openly talks about her sadomasochism, that to her being beaten during sex is healing, she says in her own words. And she's being very serious when she even says that these other people who do the S&M and the sadomasochism, that it's just accessories to them, like dressing up in the whips and boots and stuff. But to her, it's very real. And those S&M people just don't get it, because only people like her really get how enjoyable pain is. Here she is in her own words.
It's like a lot of people misunderstand gay with S&M and they think it's super, and I have to like explain to people how, like, where it's more like you're tied down because you need to like be able to like have somebody hold you down and be able to heal once you're being like or something. It's like it comes from that real place of like people or like darker, like that kind of, but it's a great thing to be able like see everybody's sexuality, or be able to heal once you're being like or something. It's like it comes from a real place of like, you know, as opposed to being accessories or something.
So the point is, again, this is real. I don't take it lightly. I don't go around just slandering people and, oh, I don't like them because they're a celebrity and they're rich, and so I'm not going to like them. No, that's not it at all. Like I do in all of my videos, all I'm doing is laying out the evidence of them in their own words, from their own articles, from their own foundations, from their own political speeches, from their own movies. I am showing you how they, in their own words, admit that they are desperately wicked. They're the antithesis of love and peace and Jesus Christ. They get pleasure from pain. There is a ruling class of people amongst us who enjoy inflicting pain on others, namely us, but also on themselves. I know it's hard to believe, it really is, especially that it could grow to this size, but there is a cult. There is a cult among us who not only practices sadomasochism, but has the ability, the network in place to brainwash our children into sadomasochism, and our adults for that matter. It's nonstop. They broadcast to them how cool Lucifer is. He's such a humanitarian and he's super cool. And, you know, all of this, it's unbelievable that this is happening in our lifetime. But yeah, so they show them how awesome Lucifer is. And then they do the Angelina Jolie thing, and look how cool it is. 50 Shades of Grey, right? Sadomasochism. Everybody should love pain. Then we start to see new trends that we never saw. This one, go back to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, even the hippie drug culture, and you won't see this sort of self-torture. Family therapists say over the past 10 years, they've seen a dramatic increase in the number of kids deliberately cutting themselves to relieve stress or emotional pain. Some studies indicate that 1 in 5 children are doing it. 1 in 5 children. And not just children. I remember when I was working at the nursing home, a young lady invited me over to her home. I don't know her exact age, but she wasn't a teenager. She was probably 25 or 26. And yeah, when we got there and I started talking to her and being open about my faith and stuff, and she began to open up to me about her cutting. Now, yeah, she cut herself to the point that she would hide it. She would cut, you know, on her stomach or on her legs, or sometimes even like between her toes if somebody started to notice. But yeah, I've known lots of cutters, so this is very real. This is what's happening since MK Ultra went live on the masses. Yeah, it's not just Angelina Jolie and people in these SRA families who have been programmed in these self-destructive behaviors and in this sort of abuse and sadomasochism, but they've done it to our children. And I don't know why I keep saying children. I just mean the children of humanity, because definitely adults. I have known tons of adults that, yeah, this is getting worse and worse and worse. All they you know, seriously, they say they want to be handcuffed, they want to be raped, you know, things like that. So we're in big trouble, folks, as a culture, because they have brainwashed us into their Luciferian cult, and we are in a hypnotic trance. Well, we aren't. I mean, if you're watching this channel instead of the Kardashians, then you're at least waking up from the trance. Our programming is breaking down, is what's happening. And I think largely because we've turned off their programming devices. I bet if we did a study, I have no way to, you know, out of the 100 and some thousand subscribers, if I could get every single one to take a survey, I think the statistics would be staggering of how many of us turned off our cable, turned off our television, quit going to movies, quit going to Hollywood movies. And I think that's when our programming started to break down. I know that I was saved and filled with the Holy Spirit before my programming completely started to break down and the veil was lifted from my eyes and I could see. but it took the Holy Spirit leading me and guiding me into all truth. It took the Holy Spirit leading me to that step where I felt the Lord said, turn it off. You have to turn that off. It has subliminal messages in it. It has all of this stuff in it. And it was at that point, really, when I actually shut my TV off and I quit watching Hollywood movies. That was before all of the digital music, but I got rid of all of my mainstream music. So it's not just about what they're doing to us consciously, it's the frequencies that they have programmed into the music. It's the subliminal messages and everything that they have put in all of their broadcasts. So on top of we're being programmed superficially as well, like I just showed you with all those different programs and all of the violence and all of the sex and all, you know, every unholy thing superficially as well. But the trance, the hypnotic trance that we're in goes way, way deeper than that. And I wish there was a way I could take a survey, because I guarantee a lot of you have the same exact story, that you turned off your TV or you quit watching TV and Netflix, and then all of a sudden you were able to see, like you could start to see this stuff around you, and everything started to make sense. We know that the mind is capable of extraordinary things, supernatural things that they don't want us to know about. One story that comes to mind is from the holographic universe, the paranormal abilities of the mind and unsolved riddles of the brain and body. And one of the stories that he tells is about this hypnotist, magician, if you will. Now, true story. So the hypnotist, you know, in a party favor type scene, he hypnotizes this guy and tells him, puts the programming in to tell him that his daughter's invisible. So then as they move forward in the performance and everything, the guy cannot see his daughter. He cannot see his daughter even though she's standing right in front of him. So then to prove to the other people in the party that this is real, that he's not just pretending not to see his daughter, he took a watch with a particular inscription on it and put it behind the back of the gentleman's daughter, and then had the guy read the watch inscription through his daughter. And he could not see his daughter, but he did see the watch. And that would be obviously physically impossible with your eyes. But these are the abilities that we have. Psalms 82:6, God says, I have said, you are gods, you are sons of the Most High. So it's not really a riddle that the human mind is capable of this type of thing. It just doesn't make sense, because they won't tell us that we have any power at all other than being their labor force, their slave race. But the point I really wanted to make for this segment by saying that is the power of programming. This is why we couldn't see these things. Another magic trick they use is this 100th monkey effect, because there is a transmorphic field, like a 52 frequency transmorphic field. I have a couple of different theories about that number. I guess it depends on how many overlaid dimensions or octaves there are, or we are perceiving. But anyway, or I guess we don't have to perceive them for them to affect us subconsciously. But anyway, the point is, there is this transmorphic field, and when we release thought into it, that has an effect on every other creature in our matrix, in our field, in our dimension. It's like the butterfly effect. So if you haven't heard about the 100th monkey experiment, what they did was they went and they taught monkeys to wash sweet potatoes on the beach. And then they found out years down the road that they had just taught this one little group of monkeys on this one island. That's what it's called, the 100th monkey effect. But when they hit that critical mass, the 100th monkey, then somehow monkeys on other islands and monkeys in other countries started washing their sweet potatoes in the water. So that's the phenomenon. They're like, they were never physically taught it, but all of a sudden they had the idea in their heads to do it and knew how to do it, a new behavior. So that's what we're talking about, spreading the Great Awakening and spreading holy behavior again and that type of thing. We do have power. It's the same theory that the cabal used by flooding through mass media and Hollywood and everything, all of these filthy behaviors and filthy perverse ideas and violence and war and hatred and division, all of that stuff that they programmed into our minds to hit critical mass and flip culture into the darkness. Now it's happening on our side. The Great Awakening is happening. And the more of us that right here acknowledge the new idea, the more of us who acknowledge the new idea, the more of them who can and will. I know a lot of people always say, well, what can I do? I try to talk to my family and nobody will listen. What you can do is continue to learn and continue to pray. And thoughts are prayers. So when you meditate on the truth and the word of God, that is energy that is going into this transmorphic field. So the more we learn and study and concentrate on this stuff, the more in the mass consciousness of humanity, the more people will be able to receive this idea. The more people will receive the idea, even though they don't know where from. But before I move on, I just want to reiterate that this is a cult. This is a religion. This is the red Kabbalah yarn, the red Kabbalah string that you're supposed to tie around your wrist when you go through these initiations into the craft, into this witchcraft called Kabbalah. And I mean, what are the odds that every single celebrity would be in the same church? I mean, that's crazy. For people to deny that this is not an organized religion amongst because you don't see them all sitting in a church building together somewhere where you can walk in and see them all, the whole coven there together. But they're together somewhere because look at these. Look at this. Is all Kabbalah strings, no matter who it is. All of the most famous pop artists, all of the A-list actresses and actors, politicians, everybody, even these people who you don't even know why they're famous, but for some reason they're always on TV. If you can't see it, it is outright cognitive dissonance. It is outright denial. You're just simply in denial. And I'm sorry about that, but I'm showing you right in front of your face, whether it's Michael Jackson or Ashton Kutcher or Jessica Alba or Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, Madonna, just everybody. Britney Spears, what's that gal's name? Ben Affleck's wife. That guy has always made me feel weird. You got the Rolling Stones, got the pansexual Disney girl there. I mean, it's exactly Demi Moore. Look, they're even tying it on their babies. Ugh. So you can see all of these stars, whether it's Charlize Theron, who's raising her son as a girl, making him dress like a girl and everything, even though he's only 6 or 7 years old, or it's just everybody else we see in the celebrity class. They all do it. So you can see Madonna, always, of course, she was pretty open about her Kabbalah occult teachings, but she's always wearing her string. You know, all the actresses, and Michael Jackson, you know, the king of pop, right? There he is. Even though a lot of the Jackson brothers claim to follow Islam, there's Michael Jackson with his red Kabbalah string on. Beyonce, I mean, it's politicians, actors, singers, all, you know, our celebrities, the ones who consider themselves the ruling class. So my point is, it's a cult. This isn't just a social thing when you talk about the trans agenda and all of the rest of it. This is an actual religion. I mean, look, here's Paris Hilton just sitting there in a $3,000 dress. You think she's going to tie a piece of string on her arm? She's got bracelets worth more than my house. And she's going to go out with a piece of yarn tied on her? DiCaprio here. Seriously, you're going to wear a tuxedo? You dress to the nines in a tuxedo and you're going to tie a piece of yarn on your arm? Yeah, this is the real deal to them. They take their religion very seriously, and it is a religion. This is a cult, and they are all in it. Look at them. They advertise it.